Now it's time for Capes and Cowls. Friends, I don't care much for the DC cinematic universe. Part of that, I suppose, is that I am an unapologetic Marvel Studios fanboy. Since that very first Iron Man movie, I gotta tell you, I think that Marvel has been knocking it out of the park. And true, some Marvel movies are pretty mediocre and are not helped by the Marvel house style. But so many of them have been so great, and they have created such indelible depictions of the characters that I grew up reading, then how could I not love them? Now, I would like to like the DC movies as well. Who wouldn't? If anything, I was a bigger fan of DC coming up than I was of Marvel, going all the way back to the Superpowers action figures that I absolutely adored, and the little mini comic books they came with, which were probably my introduction to comic books in general, plus just the DC pantheon, your Superman, your Batman, your Green Lantern, the members of the Justice League, Wonder Woman. They're so iconic and they're so indelible. While Marvel traffics in complicated, more realistic superheroes, the DC pantheon is so archetypical. And they've been able to use those characters to make really great movies. And so it's a head scratcher to me that this current wave of DC movies, with the exception largely of Wonder Woman, have been such misfires. To my mind, you can saddle a lot of that on the influence of one Mr. Zack Snyder. I think that his movie Man of Steel, his take on Superman as an almost irredeemably violent film and full of unnecessary machismo, has really marked this iteration of DC movies. And there's perhaps nowhere that that's more apparent than with Aquaman. Aquaman, who used to be an underwater sea king dweeb, is now the big, muscular, long-haired, bearded Jason Momoa. Now, there is nothing wrong with representation in the movies, and I would like to see more of it. Aquaman does not need to be a blonde dude. And Aquaman, instead being, I believe Momoa is Samoan, is absolutely great. My problem with it comes from a depiction of Aquaman, particularly in the Justice League movie, as this sort of dude bro, musclehead jerk, right? It's almost like they're trying to ape Marvel's Thor, but without any of the charm, replacing charm with pure swagger. And so I came into Aquaman's recent solo film with a fair amount of skepticism. Still, I had heard that this was a pretty good one. And why not? It certainly has the pedigree. It was directed by James Wan. James Wan, who had directed the Conjuring movies, which I absolutely loved. He directed a Fast and the Furious movie to great effect. There's no reason to think that he couldn't do Aquaman some justice. So, did he? I don't know. Here I am weeks after having watched Aquaman, and I still can't decide if I liked it or not. There are a lot of big swings in this movie, and goodness knows I like big swings, and I like big, grand, operatic design. In some ways, Aquaman, particularly in the design of Atlantis and the Atlanteans, is closer in look to my beloved Flash Gordon than any other movie this year. And it takes similarly big swings both with narrative and with design, which I appreciate. The movie does not lack for scope, as it follows Momoa's Aquaman, significantly toned down from his brosif characterization here into a more straight-up, charming and sarcastic hero, which is much more effective and closer to a movie I would like to watch. Momoa is a talented performer, and I think that somewhere in there he could give a depiction of Aquaman that would really work, but I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we're still a little too tied to chip on the shoulder to really work for what I think this movie could be. So Jason Momoa, he's accompanied by Amber Heard's Queen Mera. I guess she's not a queen here, but Mera, Aquaman's traditional red-headed companion, as they go looking for the Spear of Atlantis or something in an effort to unify the 5 kingdoms of Atlantis and save them from Patrick Wilson's tyrannical rule. The movie also co-stars the great Willem Dafoe and the great Nicole Kidman doing fun camp work here. I suppose, if anything, I wish this movie had leaned a little bit more campy. Momoa seems to think often that he's in a more serious movie than he is, and Amber Heard, as much as I would like to be able to single her out as a talent, just isn't doing good work here. The movie also suffers from an absolutely just terrible flashback opening that honestly a half hour into this movie I straight up shut it off and walked away. And when I finally decided to get back into it a couple of days later, the movie finally kicked into the more insane parts that made it somewhat enjoyable. The movie's also very unwieldy. While the movie is largely about defeating Patrick Wilson, Black Manta is also shoved into this thing too. I think maybe either a smaller movie wherein Aquaman has to fight Black Manta, or a full-on camp fest versus Patrick Wilson might have been the way to go, but I suppose I could armchair quarterback this thing all day. The movie does have a very cool soundtrack, and Wan does bring some very interesting visuals to it, along with some truly insane choices like a sea monster voiced by Julie Andrews. There is promise and potential and even success here, but not quite as much as Wonder Woman, and certainly a far cry from the home runs that Marvel's been able to muster, which is a shame because, again, I think these DC heroes could do it, and I don't think the casting is bad or wrong. There's just something about the concept, and again, I feel that heavy hand of Zack Snyder, because all of these movies are born out of his Superman movies and his Justice League movie, that the whole thing still is misfiring for me. Still, Aquaman, did I like it? I don't know. Maybe 2.5 stars for now.